Welcome to Millens TV. Today I'm going to ask Keith to give us some relationship advice. What sort of relationship advice are you giving me, Keith? I'm getting a bit worried here.
Well, I don't know what you know about relationships, Ross, but I have learned that business is really about relationships, and people get together because they believe by being in a relationship, whether that be a trust or a partnership or a company or any other sort of business relationship, they will be financially better off. And that's probably true. The day of the sole trader is very difficult. But the trouble is keeping people together in this relationship over a period of years, because life changes. We've had recent examples, Ross, in the office where one partner in a business just wanted to leave because they want to pursue other interests. Not they dislike the people, they just wanted to do something else. We've had a lady who has a very sick husband and wanted to decrease her involvement in the business to care for her very sick husband. And just last week we had the ultimate sad occurrence where a partner in a business or a gentleman in a business just died suddenly. It was totally unexpected.
Well, these sort of situations must put pressure on those relationships. How have it's very stressful at that time, I imagine. What's been your advice or experience to people about how to cope with these things, or how they should have tried to cope with them?
Well, they are very stressful, and unfortunately the relationships that were good for a number of years can suddenly become strained as people look through the prism of their own family interests. The best time to do it is when we're all happy and together, and we don't want to rely upon the certainty of an oral understanding about how to terminate a relationship. You've never discussed it, and that's what people do. They rely upon it'll all be good, it'll never happen to me. But it does happen, so we encourage people to have what we call a relationship agreement. Now formally, this might be called a partnership agreement, a shareholder agreement, or a unit holder agreement, depending on what structure you run your business through. It really boils down to the relationship agreement between the business partners who are in it. I use that word partners widely, Ross, not as a strict lawyer.
Yeah, no, we're not strict lawyers here. Fully agree, because I recently had a situation where a client rang up, was telling me about all the issues they were having with someone in their trading unit trust, and I then said, well, what does your unit holders agreement say about all this? And they said, what unit holders agreement? So it's sort of going into a fairly substantial business with other people, with other interests, and not actually having any written agreement between you saying, you know, what's going to happen if this occurs or that occurs or the other situation. So we certainly strongly recommend everyone have, as you've called it, a business agreement.
Well, what happens, Ross, is that you can have it, but the real issue is the valuation. And what money will I get if I leave, or my spouse, I die and my spouse has to rely upon this money? What will be the valuation of the business? And of course the leaving person says it's worth a lot of money, and those who are staying say it's not worth much at all, or it's worth less because you're no longer here. Some might argue, Ross, it's worth more because that person's left. But really...
Didn't we see that with BHP some years ago? I think that's a great endorsement from the stock exchange when the CEO leaves and the share price booms up. Well, but I mean, that does raise an issue, that if you've got a smaller business, say there's 3 or 4 people or even 2, and one of them departs, surely that's going to have some effect on the value of the business that needs to be factored into what the departing person is entitled to.
Well, some would say the easiest way to value business is get a valuer. And you can get the valuer, but the valuer has various options to do it, and they'll ask the business partners, what basis do you want this to value it upon? Is it a percentage of profit, return on capital? Is it what normally in the industry? There's various ways of doing it. And a good relationship agreement will give a method of valuation that we've all agreed upon when we're happy chappies, shall we say.
Right. There are certain industry standards about what that multiple might be. You might look at average earnings and then apply, yes, the magic multiple, but that depends on the type of industry, how sticky the clients are. And if you're in a consulting business where your clients come in month to month even, the multiple's going to be very low because there's no guarantee of what's going to be the future maintainable earnings. So if the relationship agreement actually sets out very clearly what the method of valuation is, sure, you can give it to a valuer or an accountant. They just apply the rules set out in the agreement and hopefully come up with a number.
So some other people actually put a value in. So for the next 2 years, your value is your initial capital, and you can't have any more than that. And then they say for the next period after that, it might be a financial figure. And then they buy insurance to cover this in the event of death or a trauma. But of course, if someone wants to voluntarily leave, insurance won't cover it.
No.
But again, if you even have this insurance, you need your agreement to have specific wording to cover the legal details of that. But again, it comes down to what value you're going to put. I think the best way to do it though, Ross, is to select a value, and if your family circumstances need to be greater than that if you were to die or have a trauma, take out separate life or income protection insurance for that. And don't just rely upon the business and your remaining partners to do the right thing by you and your family when you're in a strained relationship with them.
Yes, I can imagine that, and we have seen in situations where the remaining partners will then argue for a low value because of the death or the departure of the other partner. Maybe also there's cash flow issues. They say, oh, we agree that that's the value, but we can only pay it to you as and when additional profits emerge, and you know, the business is going through a difficult time. What are your options? Are you going to sue and liquidate the business to try and get the money? So it's not a real option. So I think that advice about taking out your own personal death or trauma cover is good business advice. What happens, I've seen this as well, where maybe people are forced to exit because they're a defaulting shareholder or unit holder or partner, and the value, it would seem unfair that the defaulting person who's bought out should get full value. Have you seen that where instead the full value is determined, but then there's a discount because they're being bought out?
I've seen in appropriate agreements where there is a discount for misbehaviour, shall we call it, but I've seen where it's not there. And of course then we end up in, should we say, litigation or a fight or a dispute going on.
The other thing I've seen is sometimes people say, well, because X is, you know, if X is defaulting, then X, you know, should lose their share of the business or lose 50% of it. And what I've had to tell people is that's really going to be what the courts call a penalty and won't enforce. So it's got to be something more reasonable. 10, 15, possibly 20% discount when you buy someone out because of their default.
What often does happen is the person leaves and a new person will come in, and the new incoming person will pay the money to the outgoing person in effect. But all that takes time to arrange. You need to say in these agreements not just the value but also the terms of payment, so there's certainty in this area. Because unfortunately, Ross, it becomes an area of dispute between people who are very friendly for a number of years, and it can fracture good relationships. And that's what we don't like to see here.
And the fracturing those relationships probably leads in turn to a substantial devaluing of the business, even for the remaining people, because they take their eye off the ball. They're not so much focused on the business but on the internal dispute between them and the other previous business owners. So really what you're saying, Keith, is that you ought to have an agreement, and you ought to have the agreement up front.
And in writing, and it's better, again, I use this all the time, don't rely upon the certainty of an oral agreement about things you've never discussed. Actually come and see us and put in place a relationship agreement.
Yeah. Okay, good. Well, there's a call to arms. Come and see us, and if you don't have an agreement for your business at the moment, you certainly need to get one. Thank you.
Thank you.